Good afternoon. Did everybody hear that? I've got a different gavel today. The one broke last week. A big chip flew off of it, so you have to kind of really hit the bell hard, but I think it'd been hit so many times, a piece just flew off of it. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Rotary Club of Madison. I'm Charles McClymon's club president, and it is great to have you all here today. Today's meeting is sponsored by Paul Hoffman, Aaron Embry, and Tara Grays of Lake Ridge Bank. Thank you. As you may know, Lake Ridge Bank is the name of the new bank, merged bank between Monona Bank and the State Bank of Cross Plains. They just merged last year during Paul's presidential year. Paul Hoffman joined our club in 2012 and is a familiar face as our club president last year. Aaron Embry has been a member since 2021, and Tara Grays has been a member since 2018 and is our club treasurer. Thanks to them all for their sponsorship today. Yep. Okay, our opening music. Angela Bartell will lead us in Lift Every Voice and Sing with Jeff Bartell on the keyboard. Then Angela will lead us in singing our feature song, Take Me Out to the Ball Game. All right. Okay.
So, what is Lift Every Voice and Sing? This is it's a song that was adapted from a poem written in 1900 by James Weldon Johnson for a school assembly at which Booker T. Washington spoke on Abraham Lincoln's birthday in 1900. The tune was composed by Rosamond Johnson, I assume a relation, in 1905. The tune and the poem have gained national recognition and devotion, both within the African American community, who takes this as a national anthem for their community, and also among all who seek liberation from oppression. So let's lift every voice and sing. Do the best you can. I'll try to lead you through it. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling seas. Sing a song full of the faith and the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. And the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Does that get your blood going? Be seated, please. Well, now that the Milwaukee Brewers, I can hardly say Brewers, I'm so old, it just Braves comes out of my mouth. But now that the Milwaukee Brewers have moved into first place in the National League Central Division, let's sing Take Me Out to the Ball Game. Get the Peanuts and Cracker Jack ready. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I never get back, and we'll root for the home team. If they don't win, it's a shame. Oh, it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game.
Thank you, Angela. Let's play ball. Okay, one of the traditions that we've started this year is a moment of gratitude each week. And this week, Michael Muka is going to provide our moment of gratitude. Michael joined our club in 2020 and is the chief engineer and director of the Madison Metropolitan Sewerage District. Let's hear from Michael about his moment of Rotary gratitude.
Thank you, President Charles. This is a great idea, by the way. It really got me to think. So why am I a Rotarian? To be a better leader. Oh, that's right, I have slides. How can we not be inspired by those exercising leadership in our community who come into our house to share their stories? This was a memorable Senator Baldwin when she was here talking about the work she needed to do to get bipartisan cooperation for the Respect for Marriage Act. And it was a very inspirational moment for me. How can we not be inspired by fellow Rotarians sharing a solemn space together and reflecting and acting and going to the Chazen Museum, seeing the exhibit? It was extremely powerful, and then reflecting on it and then coming up with personal actions we are going to take to undo some of the wrongs our own community did. I want to thank Scott Strong and Ron Luskin for making that happen. How can we not be inspired by those doing a lot with a little? I had the honor of serving on Jen Savino's grants committee, and we looked at over 70 applications for grants. I had the opportunity to make site visits, which was, I would say, a profound experience for me, because we see people doing great work here. Did you know that young people, especially coming from poor households, are not banked? They do not trust financial institutions. This organization and the Rotary funds we used is to have young CEOs have bank accounts and become the professionals of the future. Here is one. You see all the lanyards. These are volunteers at this organization that provides special care for medical care. They're doctors, interpreters, nurses that provide services every day in our community. And finally, this one was 3 blocks from my house. I never know it existed. It was Underdog. I love dogs. I didn't know existed. It was this little place, and they take care of dogs that are suffering. And it had a part in my heart, but when I learned that most of these dogs come from homeless people, I had a hint of judgment when I asked the question, why do homeless people have dogs if they can't take care of themselves? And she looked at me and said, it's the only friend they have. That's why they do that work. Rotary funds that work. So what I get from Rotary is a sense of gratitude for all the work happening in our community that's invisible to us. It's the hope. There is more good happening in this world than bad. We see in social media everything's bad. And just energy to do my part to join all those others who are doing work in the community. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. Those are some excellent examples of our theme for the year is create hope in the world. And that's another excellent example of how Rotary creates hope in the world. So thank you for sharing that. Alex Vitani chairs our Rotaract Advisory Committee, and he has an announcement for us. Alex? You got a fan club over there.
Check is in the mail, Neil. Thank you. Hello, fellow Rotarians. Thank you for a few minutes of your time this afternoon. With the school year quickly approaching, we'll be kicking off our Rotaract for the year, which is the version of Rotary for students on campus. And Charles, I love the theme of gratitude this year. I'm grateful for this club and the investment that you all have made in me and my time and teaching me how to be a good role model and leader in our community. And so I think the best way to repay that is to give back. And so I'm going to ask you all to give back as well. So you can see up on the screen just what we're looking for this year. First, if you're able and willing to join our committee, we're going to have our planning meeting before our lunch on August 9th at 11:15. There we'll talk about plans for the year, some of the things we want to do with the club, including community service projects, social networking with our club, and then segueing into point 2, call for presenters. These are the topic areas that the students have asked for speakers this year. So if you or someone you know in this room is in healthcare, business, law, or has valuable life skills like investing, personal finance, professional development, career coaching, we would love to have you come and make a short 20 to 25-minute presentation to our students. And then lastly, if your organization or your committee or some other person you know in the community is looking for volunteers and service opportunities, our students love to give back. They would love to find ways to partner with the Rotary Club on volunteer opportunities as well. So feel free to email the office or me directly with any of those opportunities, and hope to see you at our Rotaract meetings this fall. Thank you.
And our newest member, Maria Hayda, is going to introduce our guests and visiting Rotarians, if there are any. Maria.
All right, so I'm going to announce the guests. And I'd like the guests, of which I was one not that long ago, to stand when your name is called and remain standing, so you'll be recognized as a group at the end. So we have Dave Anderson, who's a visiting Rotarian from Wausau. He's the past district governor for District 6220. We have Isabella Andrews, who is a guest of Bob Sorg. We have Chad Bartel, who's a guest of Jeff and Angela Bartel. We have Tom Keller, who's a guest of Scott Hamerson. We have Tiffany Malone, who's a guest of Angela Bartel. We have Jack Novick, who's a guest of Jean Engelhardt. We have Marion Ryman, who's a guest of Valerie Renk. We have Dave Schwartz, who's a guest of Jean Engelhardt. We have Jennifer Winding, who's a guest of Bob Winding. Victoria Thaler, who's a guest of Aurelie Estrada. We have Norma Portnoy, who's a visiting Rotarian from Boulder, Colorado, and Stu Dolmick, who is a guest of Norma Portnoy. Okay.
Thank you, Maria, and welcome to our guests. A couple of quick announcements. Aurelia Estrada announced last week that our 6th annual Bring a Child to Rotary Day is set for Wednesday, August 23rd. Our program committee has arranged for a yo-yo champion to be our speaker, so it should be very entertaining for both kids and adults. The cost is $10 for guests up to age 18 or $20 if you bring an adult child, who are also welcome. There are orange sign-up sheets at the back table, and you can also pick one up on your way out today. A reminder also that membership dues were emailed out to members a few weeks ago via the Club Runner software. Membership dues are due next Monday, July 31st. If you haven't paid yet, you'll be receiving an email with a due statement from the office tomorrow. Since the system is new, we wanted to be sure that you saw that it came from Club Runner. Watch for your email. If you have any questions, ask one of the office people. They'll help you with that, help you get those dues paid, all right? We have birthdays to celebrate with a bit of humor and wisdom that complements Rotary's mission. We also encourage members to make a gift to our Synergy Scholarship Fund that represents their age, rounded up to 100. July 23rd, we have Peng He, who also recently joined our club. July 24th, Lynn Sexton. July 25th, past President Roth Judd. July 26th, Sandy Morales. July 29th, Angela Titus. July 29th, Jennifer Weitzman. Thanks to our celebrants for their contribution to the Madison Rotary Foundation Community Grants Endowment Fund, and please join me in wishing them a happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Rotarians. Happy birthday to you. So members in the news. So our very keen team of Brian Baskin and Jason Barron pointed out to me, they're always editing and they're always watching everything that we do and say. They're on top of it. They pointed out that I may have done a slight faux pas last week. And so I'm doing a disclaimer like they do in the Wisconsin State Journal and the Capital Times. You know, they print a correction in the air, so I'm going to correct the record. But they think that this is the start of a blooper reel. So I wanted to share that with you. Jane, do you have that, what they so kindly sent me? And congratulations to member Valerie Rank, who has recently renounced her retirement as CEO of Habitat for Humanity of Dane County. So I have checked with Valerie, and it's true, she did not renounce her retirement. In fact, she affirmed it to me and confirmed it, that she announced her retirement. But don't you love the alliteration? Rank renounces retirement, right? That's some good alliteration. Anyway, mea culpa, okay? I never admitted to being a prefect president. Okay. Other members in the news, Kaleem Kerr was quoted in the Capital Times about One City Schools. Baltazar de Anda Santana was quoted in the Cap Times about broadening the employment pool in Wisconsin. Letitia Nelson and Becky Steinhoff were quoted about raising the minimum wage at the Goodman Community Center to $20 per hour. And James Ty was quoted in an article about the new waterfront design for Lake Monona. Thanks for all of the good things that members are doing in the community. Okay. Now we're on to our program. Our speaker today is Brian Mason, who was named Director of Name, Image, and Likeness Strategy at the University of Wisconsin just this past August. He's a 15-year veteran of Wisconsin athletics and leads the UW's NIL strategy and the ongoing development of the Badgers' holistic NIL program for student athletes. Prior to joining the staff at Wisconsin in 2008, he spent 3 years in the athletics media relations office at his alma mater, the University of Northern Iowa. Brian is going to talk with us about NIL and what it means for Wisconsin athletics. We look forward to your presentation, Brian, and in your honor, we've made a contribution to the Rotary International Polio Plus Fund for speaking with us here today. So please welcome Brian Mason.
All right. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you for taking the time and giving me this opportunity. This is a topic that I obviously deal with on a daily basis, name, image, and likeness. But it's one that is foreign to a lot of folks and can mean different things depending on who you talk to. So my intent today is to provide you with a little bit of insight into the world of NIL as we view it here at the University of Wisconsin, and really about the impact of NIL on our student athletes and where we go from here. So I'll start with a little bit of a definition. So what is name, image, and likeness, or NIL? Essentially, it is the right to publicity as it pertains to college student athletes. Now, that was a right that was largely restricted by NCAA rules for decades, going back in history. But as of 2 years ago, student athletes have been able to monetize and really be in control of their NIL. So they're able to be compensated for things like endorsements, social media posts, in promotion of a business, making appearances, holding their own camps and clinics, signing autographs, all sorts of things. It also opens the door for them to retain representation, marketing representatives or agents. So what is NIL not? There are three main pillars to answer that question. The first of which is that NIL opportunities cannot be provided without quid pro quo. That is, a student athlete has to do something in order to be compensated for an NIL activity. This is not money for nothing. The second pillar there is that NIL deals cannot constitute pay for play. And I would add pay for performance, meaning that they cannot be tied to a student athlete's participation athletically or how they perform on the court or on the field. And the third, and the one that really causes the most headaches and headlines in the world of college sports these days, is that NIL activities cannot be considered recruiting inducements, meaning they cannot be used to entice a student athlete to enroll at a particular institution. And obviously, for those of you who keep up on college sports, you know that is a central issue as we continue to move forward. So how did we get here? We see that? There we go, technology. So how did we get here? If you go rewind to September of 2019, California was the first state to pass state-level NIL-specific legislation. And that legislation would really have run counter to the NCAA's restrictions on student athletes monetizing their NIL. As often happens, a number of states followed California's lead and followed suit and had similar laws on the books that were set to take effect on July 1st of 2021. And you could see the rock and hard place scenario that was going to happen there with NCAA rules that did not interface with these new state laws. When you layer on top of that, in June of 2021, on the eve of those state laws taking effect, there was a decision handed down by the Supreme Court in a case often referred to as the Alston case. Now, Alston had nothing to do with NIL. It was really about what kind of compensation can be provided to student athletes in terms of academic-related payments. But the result of that case caused a massive ground shift right on the edge of the time when NIL was going to take effect, because it was a unanimous decision by the Supreme Court against the NCAA, and Justice Kavanaugh's opinion specifically was a scathing rebuke of the NCAA's policies and really the concept of amateurism. So it became clear that the NCAA was going to have a difficult time in the courts defending any rules or regulations that were in place that could be viewed as restraining student athletes' ability to earn. So that took us to July 1st and an interim NIL policy that really was built around those three main pillars we talked about on the last slide, and not a whole lot else. Largely, the management of what NIL looks like at particular schools was left to those schools or to the states that had state laws. And as you can imagine, that has led to a very uneven playing field. And that brings us to today. And things coming a little bit full circle, because what you're seeing is state-level legislation again being proposed and passed in a number of states. And what this round of state legislation looks at is really providing competitive advantage to the schools in those states, where essentially they can be more involved specifically in their student athletes' NIL deals. And then that second bullet point, the NCAA is also limited by these state laws in enforcing its own rules against the institutions in that state. So you can see where there's a very uneven playing field there. So one of the potential solutions to that is the prospect of federal legislation. And you've seen the new NCAA president, Charlie Baker, a number of other influential folks in the college sports space go to Congress and lobby for intervention on behalf of or from the federal government. This slide is already outdated from the time I sent it over yesterday, because two more bills have been proposed in the Senate just since yesterday, including another bipartisan bill. And the chance that any of those have to pass is sort of up in the air and to be determined. But largely those bills are aimed at creating a new organization outside of the NCAA that would be tasked with investigating and enforcing NIL rules, and also developing registries for NIL transactions and for NIL agents. The idea there being that if all of the NIL transactions that student athletes are making are public and more transparent, the tampering and the recruiting inducements that are happening across the country would be less likely to happen, because the public would have eyes on those. Again, we'll see where that goes. So I spoke about the fact that these state laws sort of kicked off the NIL era. One state on that map I showed you a minute ago that was not filled in, because there is no state-level legislation around NIL, is the state of Wisconsin. And we have largely viewed that as a positive for us in athletics at Wisconsin. We've been able to shape a policy and enforce a policy that benefits our student athletes to the maximum amount that we feel is possible. And it's part of how we look at NIL. NIL often gets defined simply as student athletes being paid to be endorsers or promoters. we've chosen to take a more holistic look at where NIL fits within what we call the student-athlete opportunity. And those first three pillars there are long-standing pillars of the student-athlete opportunity at Wisconsin. Athletic performance, right? We want student-athletes to be the best athlete they can be on teams that compete for championships. Academic achievement, we want student-athletes to take advantage of this world-class education that UW offers and then go find meaningful career outcomes with that degree in hand. Personal development is using your time in college to determine your values, decide what you're all about, and set yourself up for the next 40 years beyond your 4 years on campus. Well, now we've added a fourth pillar to that student-athlete opportunity, and that's financial advancement, because student-athletes have the ability to advance themselves financially while they're in school. So how do we help them do that in a holistic way that can support them, again, for those next 40 years, not just the 4 years that they are Badgers on campus? So a little bit of a look into what we've done in the athletic department to tailor support for student athletes in the NIL era. First of all, it's that we have leaned into it. NIL is a good thing for our student athletes. A number of our student athletes have benefited from it. Our programs have benefited from it, and we've chosen to take the approach that it's something that can benefit the entirety of our 23 sports and our 750, 800 student athletes. We've dedicated staff and resources, my position being one of those resources that's been allocated. We've really leaned heavily into leveraging our existing sponsors and our corporate partners and having them explain to them the value of getting involved and adding student athletes to their marketing efforts. We've entered into group licensing agreements, such as the jersey you can see there as an example, where student athletes are able to put their name and number on co-branded merchandise, officially licensed merchandise, that then they get a royalty payment for when someone buys the jersey with their name and number on it. That'll extend also eventually into trading cards and eventually the EA Sports college football video game, which is scheduled to make a comeback at this time next year. We stood up something we call the UW Marketplace, which is a forward-facing marketplace that gives the public, any fan, brand, or business, access to all of our student athletes. Every student athlete has a profile on the marketplace and can have deals pitched to them. Everything from signing an autograph to making an appearance to working on behalf of your business. It's an easy gateway to get to our student athletes and pitch them NIL opportunities. And then the last bullet is really, again, back to that holistic point of how do we use NIL as a chance to give our student athletes a jump start on business skills and on life skills that'll serve them well beyond the time that they're earning these NIL deals while on campus. So I want to give you a little bit of a peek at what NIL looks like in practice, because I think sometimes the default is to think of the headlines about $13 million offers made to quarterbacks and crazy things like that really in reality are not what we're seeing in the NIL space. So what NIL looks like for our student athletes is these examples that follow. One of the most obvious that if you have driven on the Beltline at all in the past 2 years, you've undoubtedly seen Mountain Dew billboards featuring our men's basketball student athletes, especially in the months of February and March as we get toward March Madness. But Pepsi is a longtime partner of the athletic department that has added student athletes to their marketing materials. I think about the Pepsi truck that drives around and Bucky Badger's on the side of it. You've probably all seen that. Bucky's great. We all love Bucky. But it adds a layer of value to a brand when they're able to utilize actual student athletes in their marketing materials. So how Pepsi has leveraged that, they've leveraged football student athletes to promote Pepsi. They've done their Mountain Dew campaigns around men's basketball. They've also done a lot of social influencing. Devin Robinson, the All-America player from our national champion volleyball team, a great example of that. She promoting the Bubbler line of beverages. And then they've also done some wider outreach to student athletes and had campaigns where athletes could sign up and be part of the launch campaign for the new Starry soda or for their Uber bottled water product. So Pepsi is a name that everybody knows. Evans Transportation is a name that probably very few of you, if any, know. And that's exactly why Evans chose to get involved in the NIL space. Evans wanted to find a way to build their brand awareness and do it in a fun way. So they entered into NIL agreements with Molly Schlosser from our softball team, Jim Radike from the football team, and put together some creative content to really, again, just build awareness about what is Evans, their brand. And the important thing for me in my role is the feedback that we've gotten from Evans is that they're seeing a return on investment for the work they're doing with student athletes. They also sponsor a PGA golfer, logo on the hat on Sundays, that sort of thing. And the metrics that they're showing from their social campaigns with our student athletes, and again, Molly is not a household name. Chimray outside of our fan base is not a household name. those student athletes and what they're bringing in the marketing space is outperforming that partnership that Evans has with a PGA Tour golfer. So what I'm going to show you next might be my favorite example of what NIL can be. I had no idea that Chimere Dike was an aspiring actor, but you'll see that might be in his future here.
Hey, what's up, Chim?
Evans Transportation.
Yeah, Evans Transportation. We cover all sorts of stuff. We're best known for covering outsourced freight management solutions that encompass all modes of transportation, from the time an order is created all the way through freight audit and pay. We also cover LTL, which is less than truckload shipments. We do LTL volume. We do partial truckloads, your standard truckload shipments, dry van or refrigerated. Sometimes we're using those refrigeration units to keep products cool. Sometimes we're keeping those products warm. We also ship many types of flatbeds. You got your standard flatbeds, step deck shipments, double drop shipments, lowboy shipments, Conestoga shipments, and even RGNs.
I got it. You guys cover everything.
Exactly. So if we can cover all that, we can easily cover you. Safety first. My hammy. I'm gonna need a medic. Quick.
Evans Transportation. They cover everything. Almost.
So there you go. When I'm out making presentations like this and talking about what our student athletes are capable of, one of the key points I always want to make is that they are capable endorsers, that they can really advance your marketing efforts. And what Chim did in this case is proof positive, right? This is more than an athlete taking a picture, holding a product, and putting it on Instagram. There's really a lot of opportunity. And the thing that I love again about Evans, and this is a quote from Ryan Keatman, the CEO of Evans, is that word fun. What he ends with there at the end. It's been super fun, and that's where I think our student athletes really excel, is in trying to reach their peers, trying to reach younger demographics, and doing it in a really fun way. This is one of my favorite NIL activities that we've seen from student athletes because it was student athlete driven. So Casey O'Brien is a captain on our national champion women's hockey team. Casey also did an internship with a marketing firm last summer, and she came away from it feeling empowered, saying, I can go pitch myself to businesses, and that's exactly what she did. So if any of you follow Quick Trip on any of their social media platforms, you know that Quick Trip inherently does not take itself very seriously, leans into fun. There's a natural fit there for what Casey proposed that she and her teammates do to program TikTok videos to promote Quick Trip. So she and 9 of her teammates did a series of TikTok videos, and what was great about it was Casey went into that not understanding that there was a relationship already between Quick Trip and UW Athletics, and what she was able to do by working with the team at Badger Sports Properties is she and her teammates were actually able to use their uniforms, able to use LeBron Arena, and really add some value to this campaign for themselves and for Quick Trip. So really a great example of a student athlete taking it upon themselves, taking agency, and going out and making something that was really cool. There we go. The All of Us research program is an interesting case study because it's not a product. It's not something that the client was trying to go drive sales toward. It's a research program being run by the National Institutes of Health, and it's taking place nationwide, including right here on the UW campus. But the one area that the All of Us research campaign was having trouble driving participants in their study was college students. Not shocking for any of you who know college students. So what they did is chose to lean into student athletes. Let's let these athletes market the idea of taking part in our study to their peers. And what happened was exactly what all of us sought when they chose to engage student athletes, which was the social media posts, like the one on the example there, drove increased attendance at these on-campus events where the all of us folks are trying to sign up college UW students. But most importantly, it dramatically drove actual signups. So prior to this campaign, all of us considered a activation on campus to be a success if it got one signup, if it added one person to the study. The last activation that student athletes were involved with on campus as a sign-up event generated 13 new participants in the study. So again, the ROI that they were able to derive from that really speaks to how student athletes can market to their peers, and speak to them in a way that maybe all of us couldn't on its own, through its own channels. Clicker. So Ignite Blocks is the final example I want to run through. And this is an example where you don't have to be a major brand with a major marketing budget. You don't have to have a partnership with UW Athletics, any of those things in order to get involved in NIL and use it effectively for your marketing efforts. So Ignite Blocks is a startup from an entrepreneur in Middleton, and what she created are these portable starting blocks that a track athlete or a football player can take to their workout in their backpack, do their workout, throw them back in their bag, and go home. Anybody who's ever dealt with traditional track and field starting blocks knows those are anything but portable. So it's a great product. And what she decided was, who better to be the face of my new product than these world-class athletes that are just down the road at UW. So Jody, the founder of Ignite Blocks, reached out and said, I'm interested in doing business with track athletes. How do I find your track athletes and pitch them on promoting my product? And I said, well, we happen to have a very easy way to do that. And so she was able to use our marketplace, filter down to the track team, and then we were able to help her discern who the sprinters were. That's who she specifically wanted to work with. And she reached out to L.O. Johnson from the men's track team, who is the fastest Badger in history, and Armani Brown from the women's team. Both of them agreed to be part of the initial launch and campaign for Ignite Blocks. And as you can see from the photos, they are the faces of this new product. And I love the feedback that we got from Jody talking about how well the student athletes did in terms of getting involved, executing what she was looking for, and just really being great throughout the process. I think that's feedback that we continually get from businesses and brands that work with our student athletes. Is they're impressed with the professionalism, they're impressed with the way they present themselves, and most importantly, they're impressed with the final product. So those are a few of the examples of where we're really seeing NIL in the commercial space and what NIL looks like at a practical level. The one thing I want to hit on that is another important part of the NIL ecosystem at Wisconsin is something called the Varsity Collective. So the collective is a third party. It's important to note that off the top. It is not associated with UW Athletics or the university, but it was founded by alumni. And the thing that I love about the Varsity Collective is that it was founded by these alumni in harmony with the holistic approach that we in athletics are taking to NIL. So the mission of the collective is to provide more NIL opportunities to our student athletes through the process of making them brand ambassadors for charitable organizations and community groups. Basically, allowing these charities and these groups to leverage the platform and the power of these student athletes at no cost to their own, no dent in their marketing budget, to have athletes make appearances at their events, to try to drive donations, to drive awareness to causes, whatever it might be. And so far, we've seen the impact really over these 9 months that the collective's been stood up and operating. We've seen the impact continue to grow to the point where now the collective has engaged 225 student athletes across 12 of our sports in deals that have served more than 20 community organizations. I will call out and specifically note that our approach to community service has not changed. Right, doing community service in our Badgers Give Back unit is still a core part of what UW Athletics is all about, but this is another way for our student athletes to derive some NIL earnings while also becoming more community-minded, becoming more of a leadership cohort, becoming people who are used to going out in the community and doing good work. So we view this as a win-win for our student athletes and for these community groups. And all the work the collective does is funded by donors. So I just want to make sure we call that out as another important part of the ecosystem. But really, to kind of summarize everything, there's a ton of negativity out there around NIL. I see it. I read it every day. There's a lot of questions, and I'll leave some time so you can all ask some questions. But at the end of the day, this has been something that has been extremely beneficial to our student athletes. It's something that we've leaned into in athletics, and it's something that we think can continue to be a differentiator for us moving forward and can continue to be an advantage for us and our student athletes. And that's NIL at Wisconsin. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Regina Milner, I'm delighted to have you understanding the importance of the changes in NIL has been very important, and a lot of people don't understand it. I have a question to ask you. From 2009 to 2013, I served on the athletic board, and one of the things that really surprised me were the NCAA restrictions on, for example, I wanted to give hockey tickets to some grandsons, and I had to confirm that they were still in grade school and not in middle school because of, and I'm wondering, does NIL change the kinds of NCAA restrictions for pre-athletes that have been really rather draconian?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways to, thank you for the question, it's a great question. There are a couple of ways to look at that. One is the extra benefits rule for the NCAA still exists, so, but where NIL opens a door is now you can do something on behalf of a student athlete, and as long as they are doing something in return for those dollars or that gift in kind, that's okay, that's allowed. There's a pathway with NIL now to accomplish exactly what you're talking about. On the other hand, the intersection of NIL and recruiting continues to be a challenging piece. And so is a person of prospect age to enter into an NIL deal? That's where they can get a little sticky, especially as it pertains to these donor-led collectives, like I talked about the Varsity Collective. It's really important to note that the rules are clear that those groups can be built to serve current student athletes, but not to serve prospective student athletes, right? Again, trying to avoid that recruiting inducement of a student athlete or a prospective student athlete attending a certain institution because of promises of NIL payments that were made. Hopefully that helps answer your question. Yeah.
Thank you, Brian. Roberta Gassman here. Thanks for being with us on this topic and trying to help the university and our athletes. So I have a two-part question, and that relates to how you go about the identification of the students who will be offered these opportunities, just so we make sure we've got men and women and a mix and diversity, and how do we go through deciding which businesses to approach and determine, do they fit our value system? Are they high sugar, anti-health, anti-wellness,
Yep.
pro-diabetes businesses?
Yep.
Or
You're not naming names there, right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
No comment on that. But how do we determine if they fit our value system for the health and wellness
Sure.
of our athletes?
I think I'll lead off by something that will probably touch on both parts of your question. It's important to note that by NCAA rule, the institution, so allowed to be involved in the actual deal making for student athletes or on their behalf. So where I come in is trying to sell the idea of working with student athletes in NIL in general, as opposed to specifically, working on a deal for a specific student athlete. So how do those businesses get vetted, that sort of thing? Is that kind of what you're asking? Sure. So largely, NIL is driven not by the institution going out and trying to say you should work with our athletes. It's the other way. It's the business saying, I want to work with student athlete X or Y. Or in some cases, like in the All of Us research campaign example, I'm looking for student athletes that are studying fields in science or have an interest in research. Can you help us identify a pool of student athletes that we could approach with this opportunity? So it's less the athletic department or the university vetting those. Now, there are some restricted categories that are part of a larger university policy on students promoting things that are kind of common sense: gambling, tobacco, adult entertainment, those sorts of things. Did that answer most of your question, or?
That was part of it, and the access to students to ensure that we're getting a cross-section of diversity.
Sure.
These opportunities
Yeah.
for financial benefit.
Absolutely. So largely, again, like I said, largely these are coming inbound from businesses. And what we have found is that if you talk to our friends at Badger Sports Properties, they will tell you the number is almost 3 to 1, the inbound interest in working with female student athletes as opposed to working with male student athletes. So our volleyball team obviously has been incredibly successful, number of All-America caliber players. They've done very well in the NIL space. That shouldn't be surprising. But it's not just the most visible female athletes. We've had women's track, we've had rowers, on down the line. What brands really are looking for as this continues to evolve, brands are looking for student athletes who fit what they're trying to accomplish more so than who's the face or name that might be known the best. And so that's where you're seeing the opportunity really cascade down through that full menu of 23 sports. You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much for speaking to us. This is an important topic, I think. Would you please speak to the disadvantages or the problematic aspects of this that you only touched on in your talk? It seems to me there are plenty of opportunities here for this to go unfavorably. So, for example, it could be as simple as existing sponsors who now want to spend less with the athletic department and more with athletes, or as challenging as a coach saying, hey, I have sponsors who are really anxious to, wink, wink, to engage the right athlete if that person comes to the University of Wisconsin.
Sure. To the second part of your question, I mean, that is against the rules. We can't have coaches directing compensation going to athletes. Does that happen around the country? I only have visibility of what happens here. We all read the headlines, and I think those types of things do go on. But that's not something that's even allowed within the scope of the rules. What was the first part of your question?
Is it likely to reduce spending?
Oh, sure. Sure. I think largely so far, and I'd say this is I don't have a quantitative measure of this at this point, kind of in the infancy of this, but I think we've found it to be additive. We've found it to be where brands want to be aligned with UW Athletics. Brands want to be able to leverage that power of the Motion W, leverage the power of the Badgers, but they also want to be able to put a face to that. And that's where the student athlete piece comes in. And so it's what I've found is in the sponsorship space it to be very mutually beneficial. Athletes are more visible and valuable to a brand if people can tell that they are Badgers and they're able to wear their uniform or utilize the logo, and vice versa. It's the activations and what the actual outcome of the marketing efforts look like really expands when you're putting student athletes involved. And again, it's not just having Bucky Badger show up at your event and wave. It's being able to actually utilize the athletes themselves. So to answer your question, I think largely to this point it's been additive as opposed to sort of moving from one bucket to another.
I'm going to talk over that cell phone. Thanks for coming. I'm interested in the topic. I was never an athlete, so I always thought that student athletes were possibly more exalted. And then I learned that that was NCAA's way of creating a category of athlete that they could exploit without adequately compensating. This looks like NIL is designed to help redress that, but maybe it's time to lose all the baggage that goes with the terminology student athlete because NCAA used it to exploit.
Yeah, and I think the genesis of that term, you're bringing up points that certainly are valid, that where that came from can be disputed. I still see value in that term because of how we view our student athletes as being more than just athletes. And in fact, that's only a small part of who they're going to be once they leave this place. So I appreciate that, but I still am a fan of the term, I guess. To your point about getting their slice of the pie, essentially, I think NIL was a good step toward giving student athletes the same set of rights that every other student on campus had. Every student had the ability outside of the student athlete population to be able to monetize their name, image, and likeness, to be able to sell their artwork with their name on it, which, like Danielle Hart from our volleyball team, is this incredible artist. And she was able to do her artwork, and she was able to sell it, but she could never put her name to it. She could never promote the fact that she was that she had this art for sale. And now the rollback of these NIL restrictions opened the door where heartart.com is a bustling store where she's able to sell her artwork. So I think NIL's gone a long way toward leveling those students' rights. And then to your point about the revenue sharing, and all of those are percolating under the surface issues in college sports right now. The California bill that I mentioned earlier, that's been tabled till next year, actually specifically calls for student athletes to receive a chunk of the revenue derived from media rights contracts, for example. So all of that is very much in flux, and I think NIL probably, when we look back in a number of years, NIL will prove to be a gateway for a larger reshaping of what college athletics look like. What form that takes, hard to say at this point. You're welcome.
Can you compare our programs to the rest of the Big Ten?
Sure. I think when I get that question, and I get that question a lot, can we be competitive? Can we be competitive in NIL? Where I always start is the state of Wisconsin, Dane County, this community. Athletes carry a ton of currency around here, whether it's the former quarterback of the Green Bay Packers, whether it's Giannis, whether it's whoever the star of the Brewers is. There's an inherent currency with athletes and our sports teams here. And I think the door opening now to UW athletes being part of that ecosystem and frankly being a cost-effective way to engage in athlete endorsements really opens the door in a way that a lot of other markets in the conference maybe don't have. I think we have such a strong affinity to our athletes, and I think the marketing potential is so big. And when you layer on top of that what Madison has to offer with the number of startups, with the business culture here, I just think we're in a very advantageous position. And frankly, that's something that we sell to athletes in the recruiting process, that the opportunity that exists here is enormous. Of course, other markets can say similar things, but I do feel very passionately about the future and what we're going to be able to offer student athletes as time goes on in terms of that sort of incubator for their NIL interests. To the question about can we compete, because you're probably thinking about, are there enough dollars in our collective versus in somebody else's collective and that sort of thing. One word of caution I would give to everybody in the room is when you read headlines about NIL, when you see stories about NIL, take everything with a grain of salt. There is no centralized database of dollars and cents, and so there's a lot of hearsay, there's a lot of BS, there's a lot of positioning. So, long story short, I feel very strongly that we are in a great spot to be competitive in NIL relative to our peers.
Thank you for your presentation today. And I'm not sure exactly how to ask it, but what sort of control is there on, or limits to, the financial rewards from the marketers to the students?
What is fair market value for an NIL transaction? That is something that is being determined as we speak. It's a very young market. So what is the cap? The sky is sort of the limit, honestly. You look at Caleb Williams was the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback at USC. He was able to capitalize on winning the Heisman Trophy in a way that his predecessors never were able to. And he's somebody who reportedly has earned into the millions of dollars in NIL transactions. So really the sky is the limit of what your value is that you bring to companies that want to utilize you in their marketing. And we're continuing to see that market develop and change. And one of the important points I always like to make when I'm talking about our student athletes being open for business, they are effective marketers, not to undersell them, but the cost of entry and the relative cost of utilizing student athletes is not that high. So really the gamut runs from a few $100s to into the millions.
Hey, a question as a parent, youth leader, and mentor. So like probably anybody else who's in that kind of a situation, one of the biggest struggles for people growing up, young adults and kids, is being able to focus on their priorities given an infinite number of constant distractions. You hear stories come out of the university like coaches calling football players at 11 p.m. just to ask where they are. And then obviously people approaching athletes with money, it would be a significant potential source of distractions, or students being tempted to constantly look out and figure out how to promote themselves. What would you say that people in my position, parents and youth leaders, could learn from what the university has learned in trying to help students focus on their priorities?
Priority is exactly the word that I was going to use. When we talk to our student athletes, NIL is completely and inherently optional. How you interface with NIL, how much you put yourself out there, how you position yourself, how many deals you try to get done, all of that is completely up to you. But the word priority is one we often come back to because at best, NIL should be your third highest priority behind becoming the athlete and teammate that you want to be and becoming the student and eventually graduate and employable person that you want to be. And then NIL really shouldn't rise above either of those other two because much like the example I gave a moment ago of the Heisman Trophy winner, in a lot of cases, the most valuable NIL deals are coming to student athletes who are the most successful. Not always, certainly not always the case, but you are seeing that. So if you want to succeed in NIL, the best way to do it is to be a great player, be a great teammate, be a great student, take care of all of your business in all those other areas, and then the success will come.
Thank you for an excellent summary of a very hot topic that I'm personally very interested in. My question is a little peripheral, possibly. Some of your superstar athletes in team sports, let's use, for example, football, are dependent on others for their glory and greatness and name recognition. Are there examples of NIL deals, for example, from a star quarterback or a star running back, where the proceeds are shared with the offensive line whose names are much less known? Yeah.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you called out offensive line specifically, because when you look at certain positions that have an advantage at Wisconsin that maybe over other places, offensive line comes to mind, the same way that, given our success, volleyball comes to mind. So we did actually have an example in the first year of NIL 2 years ago where our starting quarterback brokered a deal with a barbecue restaurant, and then as part of that deal, got the entire offensive line involved in that endorsement, got them free meals and all of that. So it definitely happens. And in a lot of cases, people are looking to engage a team. So people are saying, how do I work with the volleyball team? How do I work with the women's hockey team, as opposed to just individual athletes? I was not privy to the specifics of that transaction, but I think everybody did okay. Everybody walked away happy, I know that.
I don't know, if you're feeding the offensive line, that's a lot of barbecue. That would have cost them, I can tell you that. So, all right. Thank you for coming today. Brian, thank you for speaking with us. Next week, we have UW professor Paula Niedenthal, who will tell us about the science behind a smile. So don't miss it. Very important. All right, and we're going to end the meeting. Please stand, and we will recite the four-way test of the things we think, do, and say. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Have a great day, everyone. See you next week.